Oh, hey, so I'm here on my property. I'm doing some personal labor, increasing the value of my property through my work, and got to thinking about a little concept called the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value, I think, is one of the most underplayed economic models, economic theories in the United States, quite possibly because the labor theory of value is a centerpiece. It is the foundation of leftist economic and political thinking. So that tends to marginalize the idea in the United States. But the labor theory of value was recognized by capitalist thinkers like Adam Smith and David Ricardo and important thinkers ever since. So I figured what I would do is a little kind of mini course on the labor theory of value. So let's start off with, what exactly do I mean by this labor theory of value? And when you hear it, you're going to think, wow, that seems pretty sensible. Almost like common sense. And yet, it's not something we oftentimes think about when we're talking and debating about economics and politics. So, well, let's take an example. Let's take an example like wood. Let's say I have a amount of wood. Maybe that wood is valued at $10. And I decide I'm going to turn that wood into something. I'm going to turn that wood into a table. So I take that wood, I put my time and energy into turning that wood into a table. And now I'm able to sell that table for $50. Fantastic. It's the same wood. What happened? How did the wood that was worth $10 now worth $50? What created the value? And according to the labor theory of value, it was the labor. In other words, it was the time and energy, the human effort that I put into the wood, the skill I put into the wood to turn it into a $50 table. Well, that seems pretty sensible. But now, let's change the story a little bit. Let's say I have this $10 pile of wood, but I really don't know how to make a table. So what I might do is I might hire somebody to make that table, right? So I hire somebody to make that table, and now I can sell that table for $50. Am I going to pay the person who made the table that $40 of added value? Not if I'm a good capitalist, I'm not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pay that worker, the person who made the table, I'm going to pay them less than the value of the labor that they put into making the table. I'm going to pay them $20. So for me, the materials cost $10, the labor costs $20, and now that extra $20 is what I get to put into my pocket. That is called surplus value, and that surplus value is what I make my profit from, is where my profit comes from as a capitalist. Now, I didn't do anything to the wood. I never even touched the wood. I may not have even known the wood was where the wood was, to be quite honest with you. I may have absolutely no idea how to make a table, but I know how to use money. And I'm able to use my ownership of the wood, and once I pay that person a wage for the labor that they put into the table, I now own their labor. So I profit not from my own skills, not from my own abilities and my own work, but rather from ownership. I own the materials, the wood, which in Marxist terms is the means of production. I own that. Now, let's say I can take this a little bit further. I'm thinking, hey, I made $20 off of this table. This is pretty good. What else might I be able to do? Well, I might be able to de-skill the process. Maybe instead of having to pay a skilled furniture maker $20 to make a table, I can break that process down into smaller bits and hire 10 people to do 10 different compartments of unskilled labor toward building a table and pay them $1 each. In which case, I'm spending now $10 in labor, but I'm able to pocket now $30 of surplus value. So what I've done is I've created what? A factory. Right? I've created a factory. Now think about the incentives here. If my profits are derived from scraping surplus value from the process of production, in other words, I'm paying my workers less than the value of their labor, then that means that I, as an owner, have an incentive to find ways to pay my workers less and less, like de-skilling, like investing in machines that can replace labor or make labor more efficient in the process. I have an incentive to reduce the value of the labor, how much I'm putting out for the time and the human time and energy that's being put into making the products that I own. Well, that kind of creates a conflict, doesn't it? Between me, the owner, and the actual workers doing the work. And this is the centerpiece of leftist thought. But now, there is another argument here. There is another argument. We can also make the argument from the other side of the spectrum, from the side of the owner, that being able to take this surplus value incentivizes me to set up a system by which I am not only making tables, but I am making them more efficiently and more effectively, and thus more people, one, have jobs, and two, are able to afford tables that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. So by incentivizing me to invest in table making, everybody benefits from having cheaper, more quality tables in the marketplace that they can purchase. And it doesn't work out for the table maker, right, who loses his job to de-skilled labor. But the 10 people that are now employed who otherwise wouldn't have been employed may benefit from that. So this is the underlying tension that comes from the labor theory of value. It's that underlying tension between the inherent conflict that now exists between the owners and the workers and the benefits of the economy as a whole from my willingness to invest. So what I figured I would do in the next few videos, I think about 10 of them that I'm considering. I don't know exactly how many there will be in this mini course, but I figured I wanted to elaborate on this labor theory of value a little bit more in depth. So if this is something that's of interest to you, share it far and wide, and let's get as many people in this class as possible. Until the next video.